दीपा जी नमस्कार। मेरी आवाज़ सुन रही हैं आप?
हाँ नमस्कार।
हाँ जी, बहुत अच्छा, धन्यवाद आपका, आप आ गई हैं। अच्छा,
सो एम
ईयरफोन
आई
लेना। हाँ जी, आवाज़ आ रही है आपकी। अभी केवल करीब 5 मिनट और हैं। अच्छा, शेयरिंग मैं आपको दिखा देता हूँ कि शेयरिंग के लिए आपको कौन सा पीपीटी जब शेयर करेंगी तो आपको कौन सा बटन दबाना है। 1 मिनट।
नमस्कार।
हाँ जी, तो अभी आपको मेरा स्क्रीन नज़र आ रहा होगा।
या
अच्छा, इस स्क्रीन में यहाँ पर एक बटन है, 1 सेकेंड। देखिए, ये इस स्क्रीन में आपको एक कैमरा नज़र आ रहा है, एक माइक्रोफोन जहाँ मेरा कर्सर है। हाँ जी, उसके बाजू
हाँ,
में आपको एक एक ऐसे क्रॉस करके नज़र आ रहा है, क्योंकि मैंने शेयर किया हुआ अपना डेस्कटॉप। तो
आपकी आवाज बहुत धीमी आ रही है।
हाँ जी, हाँ जी, कुछ प्रॉब्लम है यहाँ नेट, इस माइक्रोफोन में कुछ प्रॉब्लम है। मैं चेंज करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम, आपकी आवाज़ प्रॉपर आ रही है।
अच्छा ठीक है। तो देखिए, सबसे पहले कैमरा है, फिर ये म्यूट है, फिर उसके बाद एक अपवर्ड्स एरो है।
बस वही, आपको जब पीपीटी आप करना चाहेंगी तो आप अपवर्ड एरो को दबाएंगी।
अच्छा।
तो वो आपसे पूछेगा कि डेस्कटॉप वर्सेस द विंडो, पर्टिकुलर
हाँ
विंडो। तो
हाँ।
वो आप सेलेक्ट करेंगी तो वो आपका पीपीटी शेयर हो जाएगा।
ओके।
और उसी के कुछ स्टूडेंट्स क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं। तो ज़्यादातर जिनको क्वेश्चन पूछना होगा आप उनसे कह दीजिएगा कि दे हैव टू रेज हैंड सो दैट दे डोंट डिस्टर्ब यू इन द मिडल। तो आपको पता है कि जिसने रेज हैंड किया हुआ है उसने क्वेश्चन पूछा हुआ है। और कुछ क्वेश्चंस हमारे नो इस यहाँ पर एक चैट विंडो है, वहाँ पर भी आ सकते हैं। जो देखिए, मैं जिस पे मेरा कर्सर गया हुआ है, एक कन्वर्सेशंस का आइकॉन है वहाँ पर, उसके ऊपर भी कुछ क्वेश्चंस आ सकते हैं। पर आप अगर अनाउंस कर देंगी कि जो स्टूडेंट्स रेज हैंड करें तो आपको पता है कि वो आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे। तो आप चाहें तो बीच में भी उनसे क्वेश्चन ले सकती हैं या फिर सेशन के बाद, एज कन्वीनियंट टू यू।
तो शुड आई ट्राई दिस ओपन शेयर ट्रे में
हाँ
क्लिक
जी,
कर?
हाँ, हाँ जी, हाँ जी।
तो
1 मिनट, मुझे स्टॉप करना पड़ेगा शेयरिंग। अभी आप ट्राई कर सकती हैं।
तो इसमें मैं अपना मतलब लेकिन हमारा जो पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन है,
हाँ जी।
so now is it clear? Can you see it?
नहीं, अभी तो नहीं नज़र आ रहा है। वो जब आप एरो प्रेस कर रही है ना, उसके बाद आपको वो सेलेक्ट करना पड़ेगा वहाँ पर। वो जो नीचे विंडोज़ आ जाएंगी अपने आप, उनमें से आप सेलेक्ट करिएगा अपना पावर पॉइंट वाला, तो वो फिर शो हो जाएगा। हाँ जी, तो मैं शो हो गया हूँ इसमें। 1 सेकंड, 1 सेकंड, हाँ अभी आपका दिख गया है, अभी आपका दिख गया, आपने पूरा डेस्कटॉप शेयर कर दिया है। आप खाली वो वाला विंडो शेयर करिए, पीपीटी वाला खाली सेलेक्ट करेंगे तो आपका पीपीटी आ जाएगा। अभी दिख गया था आपका, पूरा डेस्कटॉप दिख गया था।
Now can you see my
Yes, yes, we can see you. Great, great, Dad. Good, good. Now we can see it.
now you can see my presentation?
Yes, yes, we can see that. No
Okay.
problem, no problem.
But now I will not be visible, only my screen will be visible.
Yes, while you are talking and sharing, you will not be visible, only your screen will be visible.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So after some time, when at 15:15, I will introduce you, and then my video will go off. I will be to save the, because I have some internet issues here. So I will switch off my video and I will be there through audio only.
Okay. And from this full screen, if I again want to sort of physically appear and go back to that menu of your Microsoft meeting, how do I go?
इसी को आप दोबारा प्रेस करेंगे तो आप वापस वहाँ पे चले जाएंगे. सेम बटन यू हैव टू प्रेस अगेन.
नहीं, बट वो बटन तो अब है ही नहीं. अब तो पूरी स्क्रीन, आई कैन ओनली सी द पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन, माई पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन.
अच्छा, उसमें कहीं कॉर्नर में छोटी सी स्क्रीन होगी शायद.
Or maybe if I end the show and again go out, then I come back. Okay, so I have to come out of the presentation and then
Yes.
now you can see me probably.
Yeah. And then you have to press cross and then. आप इसको एक बार दबा देंगे तो स्टॉप शेयरिंग हो जाएगा.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's looking good and we have 1 more minutes to go. तो शुरू में बस 2 मिनट लूँगा मैं. आपको इंट्रोड्यूस करूँगा, उसके बाद then we will start. I think most of our attendees are there. I think 14-15 are still remaining. I think they will be in any moment. Hello students, how are you?
Good, sir.
Fine, sir. Good, sir. Good, sir.
Okay. So very hectic schedule, online classes, back to back. So you can hear me? Any issues in hearing me?
No, sir.
Okay. So welcome to the e-commerce class, term 5 for the PGDM equivalent to MBA, second year batch, Delhi School of Business, Vivekanand Institute of Professional Studies, Technical Campus, affiliated to IP University. So today the class of 2008-19 is glad to welcome Ms. Deepak Tyagi, who will take around approximately 45 minute to 1 hour guest session with us. Ms. Deepa Tyagi, let me introduce her. She is an IIT engineer and did a management degree from MDI Gurgaon. She has 33 years of experience and she has worked on very large projects of Government of India like BharatNet, and she also represents India in ITUT, and she has active interest in all the latest thing including artificial intelligence for health. Currently, Ms. Deepa Tyagi is Deputy Director General, TEC, Government of India. And based on my special request, she has agreed to speak to the students about future technologies like 5G, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and M2M machine-to-machine communication and the challenges. So Ms. Deepa Tyagi, most welcome to this guest session. And I, on behalf of Delhi School of Business and Vivekanand Institute of Professional Studies, welcome you to this guest lecture, and we are obliged with your presence, and we shall be very happy and grateful if you can share your thoughts with me and the students of Delhi School of Business for the next 1 hour. And session is yours. You may like it to steer the way you want, Q&A in middle or Q&A in the end, or the way that you want. It's up to you. So now it's around 15:18. So we have approximately 1 hour plus. So floor is yours, ma'am. You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address this smart batch of MBA students. It is indeed my proud privilege. So, good afternoon, all the students. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay. Good. So, well, I have already been introduced. So, of course, let me just give you a slight introduction about myself. I am Deepa Tyagi, and I belong to the Indian Telecom Service, which is one of the several All India services, recruitment to which is done through Union Public Service Commission, UPSC. I have about 35 years of experience in the telecom sector, and I belong to the Department of Telecommunications under the Ministry of Communications. And our minister right now is Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad. And he's also the Minister of Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications, and Ministry of Electronics and IT. And because these two are very interrelated ministries. And apart from these two, he's also the Minister of Law and Justice. So, of course, when I was invited to give this presentation, I was heading Telecom Engineering Center, which is the technology arm of the Department of Telecom under the Ministry of Communications. But on first, I have also taken over as head of NTI PRIT, because as you see the opening slide, it says head NTI PRIT, and I'm sure you must be wondering what is this organization called NTI PRIT. So let me just so TEC, where I was earlier heading, was the technology wing of DOT, and the major tasks which have been assigned to TEC are formulation of standards. This is basically a standards forming body of the Ministry of Communications for all telecom products. And last year, there has also been a gazette notification by the Government of India considering the huge security ramifications of telecom and electronic networks in the country. Now, from now on, any telecom product, whether indigenously developed or imported from outside, is supposed to be subjected to mandatory testing for certain security related parameters. And only then these products would be allowed for deployment within the country. So TEC is also forming specifications for the mandatory testing of all these products. And the organization that I am heading now since the 1st of September is the National Telecommunication Institute for Policy Research, Innovation and Training. So this is again under the same Department of Communications. And apart from these two, TEC and NTI PRIT, there are other organizations. There are several PSUs that you may be aware of under the department, like BSNL, MTNL, and then we have BBNL, which was entrusted to implement Mr. Modi's, our Honorable Prime Minister's Digital India program of connecting 2.5 lakh villages by optical fiber. So that's a new organization which was set up about 6 years back, Bharat Broadband Network Limited. And the network that they are trying to set up is called BharatNet. So the aim being that we want to extend broadband connectivity to even our villages. And then, of course, you have the ministry, which is mainly doing the licensing work. So we have 3 major telecom operators in the country right now. And I'm sure you must be following that the telecom sector is in a big turmoil at the moment. So we have Reliance Jio, we have Airtel, we have Vodafone Idea network, apart from, of course, the government operators, namely BSNL and MTNL. And then we have another unit in DOT, which is the R&D unit, which is called CDOT, Center for Development of Telematics. This is the organization which was instrumental in bringing about a telecom revolution in the country about 20 years back under the leadership of Mr. Sam Petroda, when he indigenously manufactured and designed electronic exchanges for deployment in the rural India. It is only after that that your entire country got connected through these telephone exchanges. And then, of course, you have a universal service obligation USO fund, which is a large corpus of money which is contributed by the telecom service providers, the the government operators and the private operators. And this is a corpus which we use for bringing in telecom services in areas where it does not make sense for the private sector to venture out. So this is towards the universal service obligation of the government of India. And then of course you have the Regulatory Authority of India, which is the TRAI. And then for settlement of disputes between the government and the operators, or disputes between the TRAI and the government, you have a TDSAT, which is the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal. So this is just an overview of the Department of Telecommunications and the major agencies which are working under this, ranging from the regulatory body, the technology wing, the Policy, Research, Innovation and Training Center, which I am heading right now, the R&D unit, and of course the licensing cell. So now let me just now begin with so the topics that I would be covering today are the following, starting from 5G, and then I will quickly cover artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and machine-to-machine communications. So you must have been hearing 5G all this while. 5G has been in the news since almost 2 years now. So let me just give you a brief overview that it was in 1876 that the first telephone call was made by none other than Alexander Graham Bell, who's called the inventor of the telephone. So this was on 10th March 1876 that the world witnessed the first telephone call which Alexander Graham Bell made to his assistant, Mr. Watson. And the first sentence, the first words that he said on the telephone call were, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." So that was a revolutionary step. And truly, we have come a long way from there in these last 154 years. And after that, of course, there's been no looking back. First, there was fixed line telecommunications network, and then it was only in 1979 that the world saw the first mobile communication network in Japan. And this was referred to as the first generation of mobile communications. Now, let me just tell you, first generation was predominantly voice calls. So it was just making voice calls on an analog network. Then came the second generation of mobile communication, wherein apart from voice, it was also supporting text messages, SMSs. And it was mostly a digital network. So it was a transition from an analog network to digital network. And from a voice-only network, we migrated to voice plus text. So this is the second generation of networks. Then came the third generation of mobile networks, wherein it was voice plus text as well as data. And not only data, when you are fixed at a place, the way you were getting data in a fixed network, but this was data on the move, which was a great revolutionary step. So 3G marked a great milestone as far as data communication was concerned. So cell phones, they were no longer just about calling and texting. They became the hub of social connectivity. This was then followed by 4G, which is the current generation. Reliance Jio is a completely 4G network. Even Airtel is a 4G network. I'm sure you all must be aware. You must have all migrated your networks, your SIMs from 3G to 4G. So 4G would be a very recognized term in your lives. So essentially, what led to this mobile broadband? See, initially it was broadband or data communication from home, from your desktops. And mobile was essentially seen as something that you were used to for talking and texting. But gradually, mobile and broadband, there was a marriage of these two, and increasingly, people started accessing broadband on their mobile. And this led to what is called mobile broadband. And this was facilitated by the third generation and the fourth generation of mobile communications. Now, 5G, of course, it has still not been introduced in the country, but very soon, maybe sometime the end of this year or next year, we might be doing some licensing activity related to 5G. But 5G is something truly life transforming. It is going to change the way we are going to live our lives and the way we are going to work at our workplaces. Not only is it going to have significantly large amount of data capacities, but it would also have a huge number of use cases and services which may have very differing kind of requirements. For instance, you are aware that you download a lot of data, a lot of applications, a lot of content from the internet. So this is one application of the broadband. The other applications could be wherein you are having a connected world. You have driverless cars. You have robotic surgeries, where you need instant communication because you have a robotic arm which is performing some very critical, crucial surgery. And it is being controlled by an expert who's sitting millions of miles away from the actual location where the surgery is happening. So for this kind of low latency surgeries, you need a network which should be extremely fast, which should be extremely alert, and which should be smart enough to allocate resources as per the demand for this application. So this is what 5G network is going to bring with it in its fold. So ultra low latency. Latency, I mean, I don't know whether, some of you may have an engineering background, so you will understand. So when you say latency, you mean the amount of time lag that is there. So there might be some applications where latency is not an issue. For instance, if you're downloading a film or some paper or some research paper from the net, then latency is not an issue. But say if you are streaming, you're streaming down some music or some movie, there a small buffering is a major irritant. It may not be acceptable. So depending upon the kind of application that you are using, latency becomes an important aspect. So let me go to the next step. Yeah. So for all these telecommunication mobile technologies, there is an organization called International Telecommunications Union, ITU, with its headquarters at Geneva, which are the main standardization body for all these mobile technologies. Because otherwise, if there is no standard way of operation, then we may come across a situation where a network operator in the US or a call from the US is not able to land on a device in India. So the communication has to be as per a certain standard, as per a certain protocol, and these protocols are all well defined in advance. And all the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, the service providers, the licensees, they have to adhere to these standards. So 5G standards are being formulated at International Telecom Union, which is a standards development organization for mobile communications. And this is a standard slide which I have taken from ITU, which clearly shows the 3 basic use cases which are going to be available in 5G. One is, of course, the enhanced mobile broadband, which is nothing but it will enable 10 times more peak data rates. It will enable user experienced data rate, which will be 100
Ma'am,
times what you are seeing now.
ma'am,
Yes,
ma'am, sorry to disturb you, but your slide is not visible to us.
your slide is, you are not able to see my slides?
Yes, ma'am. It has gone away.
We can't see.
None of you is able to see any of the slides?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am,
Ma'am,
we
earlier it
also
was
saw, but
showing.
now it has
was
gone.
No,
showing.
ma'am.
Ma'am, before 2 minutes it is visible. It was visible, but now it is not.
Just a minute, let me.
Hello. I think some internet issue. I think ma'am will join back. So today we also have group 6.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So group 6, are you guys ready?
Yes, sir, we are ready.
Are you ready now?
Yeah, ma'am, we can hear you, but welcome back.
Yeah, just a minute, let me. Yeah, can you see my slides now?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see the slides now?
Ma'am,
Yes,
we
ma'am,
can
it
see
is
your
visible.
screen. We can see your screen right now. Yes, ma'am, now it's visible.
Okay, fine. So there are three main use cases, I said. Enhanced mobile broadband, which will give you higher speeds. See, I'm sure you must have topped up and gone to Airtel for getting some data packages, and they say how many gigabytes of data would you want for in a month or per day. So 5G will enable you to have several times more data speeds. Then the second use case is massive machine type communications. See, imagine a scenario where you have sensors placed all over, like you have pollution sensors, or you have different sensors, like noise sensors. You may have sensors which are able to detect, say, the moisture in the soil. So you can have millions of sensors spread all over, and these sensors may sense a certain condition or a certain parameter which they are designed to sense, and this data would then have to be sent to some centralized control center, wherein this data is then analyzed and some useful decisions taken based on this data. So 5G is going to enable massive machine type communications. And the third use case which 5G will offer is ultra reliable and low latency communications, which would be very useful in vehicle to vehicle communications, or say for disaster recovery or public safety, or say for things like robotic surgery and stuff like that. So these are the three use cases which 5G sort of is touted to offer. And some of the applications that you would see in 5G would be augmented reality, AR, VR, virtual reality, and you would find a lot of applications. I mean, individual users or organizations need not have their own IT infrastructure. So more and more things will reside on a cloud. Cloud means it's a centralized network owned by some service provider, and the users can just, through this 5G connectivity, they can make use of the infrastructure that is available on the cloud. So that will cut down on the investment that organizations would have to make at their end. So everything on the cloud. Can you see this slide on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So everything on cloud. So there would be a paradigm shift, everything on cloud. Then you'll have immersive experience. You can have ubiquitous connectivity where everything, Internet of Things, where you have smart buildings, you have smart factories, where you have everything, right from your electricity to your ACs, to your doors, to your inventory management, to your machines in the industry, they would all be connected. So you have ubiquitous connectivity, and you would also have telepresence. So this is the vision of 5G. So as I said, for ultra reliable and low latency communications, you can have some mission critical applications. You can have self-driving cars. You can have industry automation, because in very hazardous industry environments where it is very dangerous for human beings to sort of be present there, especially in chemical industries and stuff like that, you can make use of these robots who would perform. And these robots would be guided by commands which would be coming from some remote location. So the robot and the remote location would be connected to a very reliable connectivity, which would be given by 5G networks. And similarly, this massive machine type communication, you would increasingly find this application in smart cities. Of course, the government of India has also declared this smart city project, and 100 cities have been identified, and there is a lot of work going on. And about 30% of the smart city would be constituted by the smart ICT infrastructure. And the smart ICT infrastructure, a lot of it would be through this kind of machine type communications and through 4G networks. Of course, 5G is still a couple of years away, but globally, there are already some 5G networks in China, in Japan, in US. But of course, in India, we are still at the 4G level. But very soon, by next year, hopefully, there should be some policy related to 5G out. And as I said, the standardization work is happening at ITU, International Telecom Union. And apart from that, there are several other standards development organizations which are working on different aspects of 5G. Like, for instance, IEEE, International Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. Then you have an organization called IEC. Then you have ISO. Then you have BIS in India, Bureau of Indian Standards. You might have seen a lot of electrical appliances which have this IS certification. So standardization bodies have a very important role in as far as the technology is concerned, because again, globally, nobody makes any products for a specific regional market. It is all a game of economy of scales. So all these major OEMs like Nokia, Ericsson, Intels of the world, you get economy of scales only if you manufacture or you design for the entire globe. So that is where the importance of these bodies is concerned. Now, as I said, there are three major use cases for 5G. And while the other two use cases are still a little away, of course, the major use case is Internet of Things. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So as I told you that in a connected world where every car, every device in the house, every device in the building is connected through some sensor, Now imagine all these connected devices or connected products are going to collect the data and then send it to some central location. So there'll be a huge amount of data which would be at our disposal. And the data is important, or it's useful only if you are able to analyze and make some sense out of it. I mean, otherwise, raw data is of no use. So simply, while you may get a lot of data, but the more critical part is what do you do with that data? So artificial intelligence predominantly comes out of this data analytics. So while 5G is going to allow generation of a lot of data, but what do you do with this data is going to be governed by artificial intelligence. So essentially, it is a branch of computer science which is concerned with building smart machines capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence. So AI is an interdisciplinary science with multiple approaches, but advancements in machine learning and deep learning are creating a paradigm shift in virtually every sector of the tech industry. Now, how does AI work? Let me just give you a small analogy. Now, of course, you must have heard this term being used a lot of times, and there is a lot of hype around AI. So while of course, my slide here gives you a short history of AI. AI has been here since 1956. The first time this terminology was coined was at Dartmouth conference, and this was founded as an academic discipline. But from 1956 to 1974, it was seen as a very strategic and a very promising technology. And but then there was a AI winter, as they say, from 87 to 93, because a lot of promise was sort of generated, but AI hype could not meet the expectations that were arisen. But then from 80 to 87 again, there was a growth period in AI. And currently since 2012, because now with increasing advancements in data processing and with cheaper storage capacities, because there are three aspects. One of course is that you need to generate a lot of data. Then you need to store this data on a platform, and then you need to process this data to see some kind of a pattern in it or some kind of a learning in it. And then this learning then helps you in taking some informed decisions, right? So AI is all about data and data analytics. So even for organizations, in every organization now they are increasingly using AI. So let us try to demystify it. I'm sure a lot of you might have heard AI term being used in a lot of times, but we really don't understand what exactly is it. Why is it so useful for organizations? Now see, even for employees, it offers you foresight, first of all, because with so much of data and with AI's predictive capabilities, it helps you in preventing or predicting anything, right from potential failures in a telecom network, or it may even predict who are the customers who are likely to go away from your organization or from your networks. So the dissatisfied customers. So this data, I mean, by looking at the data pertaining to how frequently the customers have come to your organization or come to your shops or come to your institutes, and how dissatisfied were they, or how many times they filed complaints, or how many times they had some issues. So by analyzing all this data, it can offer you a lot of foresight. So it can offer you foresight. It can offer you a great assistance in coming out with some data analysis. It can provide you with some kind of a simulation ground where you can simulate those conditions and find out some potential scenarios before making a decision. So typically AI is defined as an ability of a machine to perform cognitive functions. See, what are the functions that we sort of relate to human minds? The major functions are perceiving. You are able to see something with your eyes. You're able to reason out. You're able to learn new things, interacting with your environment, problem solving, and even exercising creativity. Now, these are the things which normally you don't relate to a machine. But artificial intelligence is a typically defined ability of a machine wherein the machine can do all of these human cognitive functions. And example of these AI technologies which we can use for problem solving are robotics and autonomous vehicles, computer vision. You can have language, because I'm sure you must have used Google's Alexa and stuff like that, wherein you just speak and it picks up your language and it is able to analyze and find out what the instruction is about and then perform based on your instruction. So this is the language. Then you have virtual agents, you have machine learning. And of course, so most recent advances in AI have been activated by applying machine learning to a very large data sets. So how does these machine learning algorithms, see, they detect some patterns in the data and then they learn how to make predictions, and then they recommend by processing these data and experiences rather than by receiving explicit programming instructions. Now, of course, your machine learning analytics are basically of three kinds. They could be descriptive, wherein by looking at the data, by studying the data that has been collected, it can sort of describe a process. So one is descriptive analysis, one is predictive analysis, wherein by looking at the data, they are able to predict that this is what is going to happen in future by looking at the present and the past data. So this is called predictive analysis. And then the third kind of analysis, which can be possible through AI machines, is the prescriptive machine. That this is what is going to happen, and if you want that this should not happen, this is what is prescribed. So if you follow this, you can avoid a network outage, or you can avoid an untoward event for the organization. So descriptive is the most basic kind of an analysis. Predictive is the next higher level of analysis. And the highest level of analysis is your prescriptive, wherein it studies the data collected. It is able to see a pattern. It is able to then predict what is going to come in future if you do not make some changes, quality changes in your organizational philosophy or policy. And so it will also give you the prescriptive measures. So this is the highest form of data analytics. Now, major types of machine learnings are, as I've also shown on my slide, supervised learning, you have unsupervised learning, and you have reinforcement learning. Am I making sense, or am I being too technical? I'm trying to sort of make it as less technical as possible, but please feel free to tell me if I'm going too fast or too technical.
Yes, ma'am. It's fine, ma'am.
It's fine?
It's
fine, ma'am. Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
okay. So supervised learning is basically an algorithm that uses a set of training data, right? You have some data which you call the training data, and you train your algorithm on that data, right? So in supervised learning, this is how it works. So you have some data set, and the algorithm uses this data set, and then based on some human feedback, it learns some relationship of given inputs to a given output. Say when you teach a child, you show him an apple and then you tell him that, look here, my child, this is an apple. And then the child remembers it. And then it is imprinted in his mind. So every time he sees an apple, he is able to recall what he was told by his mom when he was a child, that this is an apple. And so that memory has stuck in his brain and he says it is an apple. But if you show him a banana, and since you have not told him what is it, he will not be able to tell what is it. So this is what is supervised learning. So there are some fruits, and there is a mom who's telling the child that this fruit is apple, this fruit is banana, and the child, he's understanding it and he's storing it in his memory. And every time in future, whenever he sees something which looks like an apple, he's able to immediately recognize it. So similarly, in the case of AI, you have a certain set of data, which is called the training data. And then you have some human feedback, which says that if you find this kind of a data, it means this. When if this is the data, then it means this. So every time in future also, whenever it sees this kind of data, which is matching with his training data, he's immediately able to tell you that this is what is, again, this is it. Now, what is so great about it? It is great because this can be done manually also, but where the data is humongous in a company, so it is impossible to go through that data and recognize the patterns. Maybe there is some pattern of data which sort of which says that this is not good for the company. I mean, you expect this shows that your customers are hugely disappointed or they are not very happy with your organization. So this is the data which shows this. Now, suppose in future, again, you come across such a data. So human mind or human eyes will not be able to detect that pattern, whereas your algorithm will be able to immediately detect this pattern and it will be able to tell you that this kind of a data pattern, when it was seen 5 years back, it meant that people were hugely disappointed with me. And now I am seeing similar data. So it means that the customers are again hugely disappointed by us. So it is supervised learning. Then you have a slightly higher advanced this thing, which is called unsupervised learning, wherein the algorithm, it explores your input data and there is no human feedback. So it explores your input data without being given an explicit output variable to identify patterns and classify data. So basically this algorithm does not have any human intervention. It just explores and on its own, it is sort of predicting certain things. And then the highest level of machine learning algorithm is your reinforcement learning, wherein an algorithm learns to perform tasks simply by trying to maximize rewards it receives for its actions. If there is an action which an algorithm has done and it's seen that by this function, there is a huge gain for the company, so then it gets set in the algorithm's memory that this action results in this kind of a reward. So it's reinforced and then it keeps on doing it. So you have three kinds of major machine learning algorithms. Then you must have, then there's another offshoot of AI, which is called deep learning. Now, deep learning is a type of machine learning that can process a wider range of data resources, and it requires less data pre-processing by humans and can often produce more accurate results than traditional machine learning approaches. In deep learning, what happens is interconnected layers of software-based calculators. These are like your neurons in the brain. They are akin to neurons in the brain, those nerve cells. So they form a neural network that can ingest vast amounts of input data and then process them through multiple layers that learn increasingly complex features of the data at each layer. And the network can then make a determination about the data, learn if it's correct or not, and then see what best decisions to be taken. So see, the rise of AI in our organizations has been the most defining business opportunity for leaders, and more so even in this pandemic area. Because again, data collection and analysis could also tell you, who are the potential carriers or who are the potential clusters where you might see outbreak of pandemic. So AI has been used tremendously in sort of controlling and in this pandemic. So every organization has to sort of use AI for its improvement, and but see, so basically, but again, see, AI is only going to give you some kind of an analysis, but ultimately that analysis has to be converted into an outcome. I mean, you may have a lot of inputs, you may have a lot of prescriptions, but unless those prescriptions are converted into some kind of outcomes, which it's of no consequence. So these predictions should result in decision making. I think I understand all of you are MBA students. So this kind of because it's a field of computer. It's not so much computer analytics as it is about deriving the insights from AI algorithms and then converting it into some decision making for the organization, which is ultimately beneficial to the organization. So that is what AI is all about in the context of organizations. So the biggest challenge in any organization is turning insights which you get from AI algorithms into outcomes, what we call the last mile, which is where the value of analytics is ultimately extracted. Now, another technology that you must have often heard is IoT. I did mention it in my previous slides, but so this is just a summary of what I have told you. So artificial intelligence is the higher umbrella, the bigger umbrella, under which you have machine learning. And then in machine learning, you have supervised learning, you have unsupervised learning, and then you have the reinforced learning. And then you have a still higher form of learning, which is called deep learning, which is similar to the way our neurons in the brain, they operate. They permit software to train itself to perform tasks like speech and image recognition by exposing multi-layered neural networks to vast amounts of data. But every technology brings in a lot of challenges. And clearly AI has huge challenges because firstly, AI depends upon your data. Now, they say the 4 V's of data. The volume of data, V is volume. The veracity means how correct the data is. Because if you just collect some data which is not truly representative of all genders, all geographies, you may just collect some data pertaining to, say, India. Now, India is not the whole world. Now, based on this data, if you come out with some analytics and some decisions, which may be completely faulty, they may apply maybe just to India, whereas you may think that this is applicable to, because if you remember, even during the pandemic, when there were fewer cases, there were news items that this is affecting male members more and women seem to be safe, because probably at that time they didn't have huge data. So any analysis that you do with a limited data could be very detrimental, ultimately. So the 4 V's of data, which are very critical, are the volume of data, the veracity of data, how correct it is, the velocity of data, how quickly the data is changing. Because if you have collected data today, but it's a rapidly changing data, so if you do analysis 4 or 5 days later on a data that was collected 5 days back, you may get completely wrong results, right? So data is critical. That how big or how much data is enough for you to arrive at some conclusion, and whether the data is truly representative of all kinds of genders. There have been instances where the algorithm has been found to be severely biased towards women or biased towards, say, African Americans in the US, or biased towards a certain section of society. So at the end of the day, AI algorithms are just a black box. You provide some data and the analytics that is fed inside does some analysis and you get the result. So it's a complete black box. So even in the case of medical diagnosis, it has been found that there have been huge instances of unexplainability. Why the algorithm has taken a certain decision cannot be explained by the algorithm. So it's just like a black box. So then standardization bodies the world over, like the IEEE, ISO, so they're all working towards making AI more accountable, more trustworthy, more explainable. Because if you've arrived at a decision, you should be able to explain exactly why you say that this is what is the outcome. Just like a doctor. See, you have some very experienced doctors, they are able to immediately diagnose, and there are not so good doctors who are not able to diagnose. But at least an experienced doctor, he is able to tell exactly how he has arrived at this conclusion. But if you are doing diagnosis through an AI machine, and if there is a question mark on his ability to analyze or on ability of the algorithm, then there is no reverse explainability. I mean, it's just a black box. So the patient cannot ask as to how the algorithm has arrived at a particular conclusion. Because increasingly now this is being used in analyzing, whether a patient could get cancer, say after 10 years. There have been cases where there are certain cameras, where they keep clicking photographs of your skin, and then they predict that yes, you could be a potential skin cancer patient after so many days, so many years. So, but then again, there are huge question marks on that. So world over, even in India, we as part of Department of Telecommunications, we worked with ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, and we were trying to sort of come out with some kind of benchmarking as to whatever data we have collected, whether that data is correct, whether that data is dependable, whether that data covers the entire gamut of specimens. So how do you benchmark and how do you validate the data? And then the second challenge is, of course, the way you have intelligent quotient. See, human intelligence can also be tested. There are so many tests which we carry out for testing an IQ, intelligent quotient of an individual, of a human being. So currently there are no IQ tests for AI machines. Just like human beings, your intelligence varies from human to human. But in the case of AI, we refer to every machine, every data analytics as an AI. There is no method as of now to grade the artificial intelligence. What would be those metrics? How would you grade those algorithms? How would you rate them? Whether it's a highly intelligent AI or it's a bad AI. So there has to be some kind of a grading of the algorithm. And then again, another very challenging aspect in AI is that in case there is a surgery that you're doing through an AI robot, and the surgery gets botched up, the patient dies, then who's liable? Because it's a machine that has done it. There is no human being involved. But some human is involved in writing the algorithm. But that algorithm was never tested. So who's liable? Would you hold the person who has written the algorithm liable for it? Or would you hold the machine liable for it? So these are certain issues which are still not being addressed. And that is why increasingly AI, we have not been able to really use AI for very important big works. But we've been mostly using AI for a lot of things where there is no human life involved and stuff like that. And then again, there's a lot of a hype, people think that if you have too many AI machines, they would be replacing human beings. So it would lead to a lot of unemployment problems. And then data privacy, because there's so much of data which is being utilized by AI. So whosoever has power, who has access to this AI has also access to data. Because in today's world, since everything depends upon data, they say data is the new oil. So just like in the past, whosoever had oil reserves was rich and powerful. Similarly, in today's world, since everything depends upon data and data analytics, big data, metadata, so whoever owns the data is going to be all powerful. So I'm sure you must be following in the debates that are going on, data privacy and data localization. Should you force all the companies to store their data within the country, or should you allow them to take the data outside? And how AI algorithms can have such a detrimental effect on guiding or changing the mentality or the opinion of the people, opinion makers. So these are some issues, trustworthiness and ethical uses of AI. That's again a big challenge, because you may start using AI for a lot of unethical issues. So since I am from the government, so these are some of the governance issues which are have to be addressed before we start using AI in a big way. So clearly, while AI is being used sporadically, independently by a lot of private companies, by a lot of agencies, but startups, but at the government level, truly, there is no AI policy as of now, and we are all working on it. And there has to be some kind of a governance of the technology, which is very important. Now, the next technology that I'm going to cover is Internet of Things. So Internet of Things basically refers to the billions of physical devices around the world that are now connected to the internet, all collecting and sharing data. So in the simplest terms, the Internet of Things is how we describe the digitally connected universe of everyday physical devices. These devices are embedded with internet connectivity, sensors, and other hardware that allow communication and control via the web. So you can have a camera which is Wi-Fi enabled, so you collect the data and you immediately upload it to some central server. You have RFIDs, you have kiosks, you have data analytics, you have point of sale terminals. So you have those swiping machines through which you swipe your cards, and the data is immediately then transported to your central control room. So basically, when the communication is between machine to machine, it is M2M communication, and this is what leads to Internet of Things. Earlier it was Internet of human beings, now it is Internet of Things. And then what we are already hearing is Internet of everything. So this is how it works. See, you have a device, or you have a sensor, or you have a meter which is taking some readings, or there is a sensor. Now in smart agriculture, you have sensors in the soil. So for the farmer, now he's waiting for the right time to sow his seeds, when there is enough, just the right amount of moisture in the soil, just the right amount of manure in the soil. So he's constantly monitoring. So you have those sensors which are going on sensing the humidity in the soil, the manure content in the soil, and the data is constantly being transported through a network. The network could be wireless, wired, or mixed. And then it is sent to a central control room, where you have an application which then detects, senses this data, makes sense of the captured data, and then it takes a decision which is then communicated to the farmer, and the farmer then proceeds with his activities. So you have a device, you have a network. Network means you have a communications network, a mobile network, or it could be a landline network, or it could be a wired network. And then you have an application. It could be an AI application. AI is an application which is then processing the data. So these are some of the M2M and IoT applications. You can have them in smart homes. You can have security and alarm, so that any intruder, if he tries to intrude, you get an alarm. So even if you're sitting in the US and your house is in Delhi, you get an alarm in the US and you know that somebody is trying to intrude. So similarly, you can switch on your ACs even while you are on the way. You've not even entered your house, but then suppose if you want to switch on the ACs 30 minutes before you reach the house. So even while you are away from home, you can, through your IoT applications, you can just give a command and your AC is inside the house, which is logged as of now, can be turned on, so that when you reach home, the house is already pretty cooled. Energy efficiency. The moment somebody goes out of the room, the lights should switch off. You might have seen in smart bathrooms. I mean, the moment you enter and the moment you get out, you see the lights shut down or shut off, and the washroom, the commode, those things, they get activated. Then you have smart wearables. I'm sure all of you must be using it in some form or the other. Then you have smart cities, where this can be extensively used for garbage collection, for water distribution, for traffic management. You may have such a traffic management system so that you get I mean, you adjust your speeds of the cars in such a way that you keep getting green lights throughout. Or if you are anticipating some kind of a jam, say half an hour later at a point, you are immediately informed and then you can take a detour. So it could be used in a smart city in a big way. Parking sensors. Now, so many times you see on the highways, the lights are all on even during at noon because some manual intervention was required, and the chowkidar who was there, who was supposed to switch off the lights, has forgotten or he's gone off to sleep. And you have the lights on even at noon on the highway. It's a colossal wastage of power. So if you have some kind of a sensor on these lights, which can sense that now there's enough sunlight and you don't need these lights, it should send a message to your master control room, and the control room should be able to shut off these lights without any manual intervention. So smart city will use a lot of these IoT applications. Then industry automation. You have smart machines, surveillance, camera, factory automation, asset tracking, even preventive maintenance. Because see, even in these global engine manufacturers, in these aircrafts, they cannot afford to have a problem occur. So they have to preventive maintenance. They have those sensors, they keep collecting data, and they are able to predict that if this is how it is going, if the tear and the wear goes on like this, maybe after say 3 months, the engine is going to give away. So some kind of a preventive maintenance, an alarm is sent, and then you do preventive maintenance rather than corrective maintenance. So it is used in a big way in all these things. Similarly, asset tracking, logistics, optimization of supply chain, smart energy, and connected cars. Of course, for a country like India, driverless cars and all is a big, it's a luxury and it's not a killer application. But surely as a technocrat, as an engineer, it does interest all of us. But surely we can use it for vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to road, vehicle to infotainment, for traffic control, navigation. So these are some of the IoT applications which I've tried to put on screen. These are some of the wireless technologies which are used. They may be too technical for you probably. So if the proximity is referred to for those wireless technologies whose range is very low. Like for instance, the technology that is used, for controlling, switching on your television through your remote. These are proximity technologies, RFIDs or NFVs. These are very short range, 10 to 100 meters. Then you have wireless personal area networks, which have a slightly higher range. Then you have wireless local area networks. Then you have LANs. Then you have neighbor-led LANs. And then, of course, you have these LANs, of course, you must all be familiar, 802.11. And then you have these cellular networks that we have by way of Reliance Jio network or Vodafone network. Cellular networks, all of us are familiar with. They have huge ranges. They are called wide area networks. So these are some of the emerging trends in machine to machine. You have increasing use of M2M for security and surveillance. You have M2M services for dynamic real-time tracking. You have supply chain management. You have forecasting. Now, even in IoT, these are some of the challenges which as policymakers we are grappling with. One is, of course, latency, because how quickly the data is collected by these sensors, how reliable the sensors are, and then how quickly the sensors are able to send the data from their local position to the central control room. So latency is important. And how crucial this data is. So you have to have a network all the time ready. And then these sensors, they have certain battery requirements. Now, if there are millions of sensors all over, so their battery cannot be afforded. We cannot go and replace those batteries because these sensors are lying in the field in very difficult terrains, or they are spread out across huge geographical areas. So it is impossible to go and replace their batteries. So their batteries should be such that they are able to last for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years at least. Imagine, see, your mobile battery is conk off in just 24 hours or say at best 48 hours. if it's a very good quality battery. So power is a major constraint. So how do you have low power consumption? So there are methods, by which the sensor goes in sleep mode. So it just wakes up and it has to sense and send upwards. And otherwise, rest of the time, because maybe you have programmed the algorithm in such a way that during the daytime, just once the sensor has to sense the humidity of the soil and then send the data upwards. So during the rest of the time, it will keep on sleeping. So that's how by sleep mode, you conserve data. So you have latency, you have availability, coverage, cost. That is one, robust connectivity. Second is, of course, standardization, because when there'll be so many different manufacturers manufacturing a product, and if there are so much of data that is being collected, so the format of the data should be uniform, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. If data collected by one set of sensors is in a format which is not understood by the control room or by another machine, then it's of no sense. So the data format has to be standardized, the platforms have to be standardized, and then you have interoperability and open interfaces. They should be able to talk to each other. I mean, this is a problem in our smart city projects also, because different cities are going ahead with different products which are not complying to standards. And it may so happen that whatever data you're collecting in one city is not understood by the data, by the machines or the control rooms available in another city. So uniformity of data, standardization of data is very critical. And so we have to work towards it. And fourth is, of course, privacy and security. Prevent malware injection and data misuse. And then, of course, there is not too much of expertise in this area, because these are all new sunrise areas, emerging technologies. So domain knowledge is missing. And these are technologies, be it 5G, be it AI, be it IoT. These are not corresponding to any particular sector. See, you have health, you have tourism, you have manufacturing sector, you have industry, you have commerce, you have telecom, you have agriculture. So these technologies are used or will be used across all sectors. So these are not sector specific, right? So while sectors can be treated as verticals, 5G, AI, these are horizontals which cut across all sectors, right? So we need to have cross-sector. So telecommunications is just an enabling technology. See, this is just a means. So AI is again an enabling technology. It is a tool which can be used to the best of your sort of capability or to the best of your advantage, to your advantage. Now, it could be used for smart agriculture, it could be used for distant education, it could be used for smart manufacturing, it could be used for so many different things. So there is a dire need to have cross-sector standardization. The different departments in the government, they are working in silos. Technologies are available, but someone, probably the Department of Telecom, because that's an underlying technology which is used across sectors, has to take a lead and bring together all the sectors and come out with some kind of a guideline. So these are, now in the case of IoT, again, some of these things I've already covered. Now, in terms of policy, see, data localization. Already Reserve Bank of India has mandated that all the financial data that is collected in the country during the course of any transaction has to necessarily reside on a server within the geographical four walls of the country, borders of the country. It cannot go outside. But for other sectors, the policy is yet to be, of course, the commission had already come out with the recommendations, but they have not been accepted yet, and it has not been converted into an act yet. So data localization, and there'll be a huge amount of opposition from the foreign OEMs and from the operators, because if it's mandated that they have to keep all the data within the country, so they would have to put in huge amount of investments and put in their servers within the country. Right now, a lot of data goes out. So it is a great security threat, right? And when India, country like India, which is generating so much of data, today we are the largest consumers and the guzzlers and the creators of data in the world. So today, I mean, we can use this to our advantage. If we force all the companies like Facebooks of the world and the Googles of the world, the WhatsApps of the world, that all the data that is generated must necessarily reside in the country, that would be a big significant thing for the country. Then IPR, because whose IPR is it? Data is being generated and created in the country, and somebody else makes use of this data for their own, furthering their marketing or commercial activities. So should we get some, should it be covered by IPR? Should we allow this cross-border traffic? How do we govern this data? These are some of the issues on which a lot of public debate needs to be initiated. So clearly, there is a huge paradigm. While technology is there with its huge enabling powers, but what we need to see is that while we should get empowered by technology, but technology should not overpower us. Because after all, at the end of the day, it is the human mind and the human control that has to be there at any cost. The moment you allow technology to overtake us and overpower us, that's where the challenge is. Be it 5G, be it IoT, be it AI. AI could have very dangerous, sinister ramifications if we allow it to just mushroom in an unregulated way. So regulation, governance of these technologies becomes very critical. So as we prepare to enter next decade, ICT, information communication technologies, are transforming the world. Developments in 5G, AI, and IoT technologies are leading towards what is being hyped as the era of intelligent connectivity, which is expected to play a major role in 5 key areas: transportation, industrial manufacturing, operations, healthcare, public safety, security, etc. But children, I just want to draw your attention to, I mean, you must have seen a lot of science thrillers and all. Imagine in a connected world where every car is connected and where you have millions of sensors in the ground. Actually, you are having that many holes through which a virus can be put inside the system. After all, your chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if everything is connected, and if from one connected device, somebody just puts in a small virus in the system, imagine the amount of chaos that this virus can cause, because everything is connected. So from one device, this virus can just get multiplied and distributed across the length and breadth of the country, of the world, in no time. And then everything comes to a standstill, right? So it's difficult to imagine a world where what can go wrong, but it has huge ramifications. Then, of course, quickly, I was also requested by your course coordinator that if I can just throw, I don't know whether I have time. Should I quickly cover IT Act in next 10 minutes? Is that okay? Or is it getting too heavy for the audience?
It's okay, ma'am.
It's okay? Yeah. So IT
Yes,
Act, of
ma'am.
course, yeah. So IT Act 2000, of course, we are all familiar with. So it is based on United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, model law. And basically, see, it is to be it covers all the transactions which are done via an electronic exchange of data and other electronic means of communication or electronic commerce transactions. So objectives are pretty much clear to everyone. To basically give legal recognition to digital signatures, to facilitate the electronic filing of documents, to facilitate electronic exchange of data, storage of data, to give legal sanction, and also to facilitate the electronic transfer of funds from banks and financial institutions. So it is becoming very important in today's world where there is so much of focus on digital governance and digital exchange of money and digital money and stuff like that. So recently, since 2000, there have been a lot of amendments. So the first amendment was made in 2008. wherein we introduced Section 66A, which penalized sending of offensive messages, because now with so much of trolling and hate mails and stuff like that, this has become important. So if you're caught sending some offensive messages, you can be penalized. Then there was another Section 69, which gave authorities the power, the lawful interception authorities, the security agencies basically, the power of interception or monitoring or decryption of any information through any computer resource. So that power lies with the security agencies. Additionally, it has also introduced provisions like pornography, child porn, cyber terrorism, voyeurism. It was signed into law on 5th February 2009. So these are significant amendments which have been, initially we could not think that such things would come up. So as we are becoming wiser, I mean, these amendments are sort of taking care of these problems. And then of course you have, it has several new sections on offenses, including cyber terrorism and data protection. Then you have a Consumer Protection Act, which is the new Consumer Protection Act 2019, which has just come into force. And this replaces the old 1986 Consumer Protection Act. And basically it provides for strict penalties, including jail term for adulteration and misleading ads by firms. And what is also important in this new act is that it establishes the Central Consumer Protection Authority, CCPA, whose primary objective will be to promote, protect, and enforce the rights of consumers. So basically this act has the provision for also this Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, CDRC, at the national, state, and district levels. And then you have these unfair trade practices, product liability, and penal consequences and stuff like that. Of course, the government is also now currently in the final stages of drafting of the e-commerce and unfair trade practices rules. And I think they should be out shortly. So this new e-commerce policy focuses on data, competition, counterfeiting, consumer protections. And these could impose government oversight on how companies handle data. And there is also a talk to have an e-commerce regulator. Just like for telecom, you have a telecom regulator. Similarly, you have, there is a talk that you need to have a regulator, and then you also need to have a appellate body. And again, those companies have to store consumer. So data is very important. So again, this issue that e-commerce companies, they collect so much of data about the consumers. So should that data be mandatorily be stored within the country or not? That has to be seen. So basically, this just sort of gives you the difference between the earlier Act of 1986 and the new Act of 2019, Consumer Protection Act. So earlier there was no regulator, now there is a talk of having a regulator. And earlier it could be filed only in a consumer court where the seller's office is located earlier. But now it could also be filed in a consumer court where the complainant resides or works. So that is a great relief to the consumer. Because earlier the seller's office, wherever that was located, he had to file the complaint there. Now it can be filed at the place or the residence of the buyer, consumer court. Then product liability. There was no provision earlier. Consumer could approach a civil court, but not consumer court. Now consumer can seek compensation for harm caused by a product or a service. Now he can go to a consumer court. Then product liability. I think consumer can seek compensation for harm caused by a product or service. Earlier he had to go to a civil court. Then pecuniary jurisdiction has also been increased. Earlier district it was only up to 20 lakhs. Now for district it's up to 1 crore. For states, it is 20 lakhs. Now it has gone up to 1 crore. And national, earlier it was above 1 crore. Now it is above 10 crore. So it's easier if you are able to go to the district or the state rather than having to file your complaint at the national level. E-commerce, earlier there was no provision. Now, of course, all rules of direct selling have been extended to e-commerce as well. And then mediation cells, no legal provision earlier. Now you can refer settlement through mediation. This is the broad framework under which your e-commerce policy is being framed. So basically a sunset clause is going to be defined for during which you can have differential pricing, but not after that. Some kind of a law to govern unsolicited commercial emails would be framed. Just like TRAI had come out with some kind of a regulation for unsolicited voice calls. Similarly, there was a do not call registry, wherein if you could register, after that you will not be getting calls from these banks and other commercial agencies. Similarly, even in e-commerce, there will be some kind of a regulation to govern unsolicited commercial. And there would also be some tax swaps for incentivizing domestic data storage. Because frankly speaking, there is a lot of opposition for storing of data within the country. People want this restriction to be away, but considering the policy issues and the security issues, I think this is a significant step that the government would have to take in spite of opposition from the stakeholders. Similarly, data generated by users in India from various sources, including e-commerce, to be stored exclusively in India. And government would have access to data stored in India for national security and public policy objectives. So I think with this, I come to an end of the program. Now, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, if you have any question, first introduce yourself, and you may ask. We have time for, because of shortage of time, maybe we can take only 3 questions. Ma'am, you can, people as students are raising hand, you can name them and they can. Or if you want, I can name them.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so we have question from, let me see, just a moment.
Lokesh,
Lokesh,
Chandu,
yeah,
and
Lokesh, go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am.
yeah.
Lokesh this side, ma'am. I have a question on artificial intelligence security. Ma'am, like you said, artificial intelligence has some issues regarding security. So, ma'am, what kind of issues like a company can face? Like he's providing us a consumer, he's providing a consumer AI based system. This would be beneficial for us as well as company. So, what are the threats they can face as a company?
See, the data could be stored firstly. So you're storing your data somewhere. So there could be somebody, your competitor through some agency. There could be some, the data could be stolen from this thing, or data could be corrupted. There could be some kind of a virus which can be injected in the algorithm, which sort of then starts giving some wrong analytics and wrong decisions. So you'll have to be very careful with your own employees within the organization also. There could be some really brilliant people who can then create some kind of a bug and just introduce it in the system. And then the system can start, because after all, it's a computer algorithm, and the algorithm can go haywire. And you might get some wrong decisions based on which the management might take some wrong decisions. So data security, data privacy, and multi-layered role-based security, that would have to be very strictly maintained. That's all.
Just one question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, when you said like data can be stolen, so ma'am, so that data received in AI, as per my guess, are encrypted. So how can it be stolen?
No, I'm not going into the specifics of it, but broadly speaking, see again, many times, see, the problem with the data is that firstly, see, let me just try to give you some real life analogy. Now, if you have a data, firstly, the data has to be constantly updated. Now, if it's an old data, or if it's a data pertaining to things that you already know, or the trends that you are already knowing. So you have only data pertaining to that. So you would be only taking decisions based on that. But if your algorithm, there are certain undefined things that you have not really visualized, or some unforeseen changes take place in your consumer behavior, right? So you don't have data pertaining to that. So you would continue to take decisions based on the existing data, which was for a certain kind of a period. But now see, for instance, even in this COVID kind of a thing, now suddenly all algorithms which were being used earlier, now they have all been rendered useless because the behavior of the people itself has changed. See, people have stopped going to the restaurants. The people have stopped going to, people have stopped wanting certain kinds of goods which they were earlier wanting. Now, this is an unforeseen kind of a situation for which your algorithms were never written. They could never visualize. So you have to quickly undo and then come out with new algorithms because the data that you had so far is very different from the new data.
Okay, now we have Shubham Arora. Shubham Arora, please
This
ask
is
your question.
again one challenge.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Shubham,
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes, please,
Am I
Shubham.
audible? Yes. Ma'am, you said that like we are largest producer of data, and we also generate huge data, India. So
Yes.
many companies like Facebook, Google, and all would be forced to come and set up their servers in India. So because of the security threat. So, ma'am,
Yes.
are there that much good infrastructure available for the companies to develop great servers for like to store their data and have some protection over here? Like because nowadays also the Facebook thing which I have been listening in the news
Yeah.
that political pressure is being there in
Yes.
Facebook thing. So
Yes.
are there be more political pressures or more political interference in the servers for data manipulations? How do this would be overcome?
No, see, there are two issues, two different issues. What you must be hearing these days, I mean, what is going on, the Standing Parliamentary Committee on IT, now they have summoned Google, Facebook, India head here. That was because of sort of they wanted to question their policy, because they have some internal policy about how they muzzle or how they delete uh, postings which are sort of hate, which incite hate and stuff like that. But now it's found that certain posts were not deleted in line with their policy. So why were they not deleted? Probably some internal communication within Facebook was heard as to that if you do it, then because it is pertaining to some person from the ruling dispensation, so it might be bad for us, and hence let us not do it. So stuff like that. So that is one thing. So here we are sort of asking them why they have not followed their internal policy religiously, irrespective of whose post it is, right? So that is one thing. It's their internal policy, but we are questioning their policy that you have been you have sort of discriminated. I mean, you look at the person whose post it is, and then you're applying your policy or you're not applying your policy. What I was talking about the data. Now, data means, see, since there's so much of data which is being generated, so well, what you're saying is right that today we do not have the infrastructure within the country. So if we force these companies that their data must reside in India, then in the immediate future, these companies would have to invest and bring in their servers here, install them in the country, but physically they would be located inside the country. So the infrastructure, the investment would have to be done by them. So it involves huge investment on the part of these companies. So that is why they dislike it. So that is one thing. And second, of course, is that so once you have the data within our country, then we can strictly ban that this data cannot be used for any other thing outside the country. So the total power over data, which today Facebook has, would go away. And it would also mean that they would have to install huge amount of server farms within the country in India, because right now all that data must be stored in some their data parks which they might be having in the US somewhere. So now they would have to create those data clouds here in the country. So it would mean huge investments which they may not be willing to do. But if we insist, I mean, they will have to do it, or just like China has banned all of them. I mean, probably India may have to take a company, but then the consumers will suffer. See, the consumers can't think of life without Facebook and without Twitter and without WhatsApp. Say in China, WhatsApp doesn't work. China has, because they wanted some kind of changes which WhatsApp was not willing to do. So they have barred, so WhatsApp doesn't work in China. They have some WhatsApp equivalent in their country. So in India, I mean, we can't think of life without these applications, although a lot of these applications, mostly from a particular country, have been banned. But Facebook kind of companies, due to their sheer size and data, have come to acquire a lot of clout and a lot of power in this current situation wherein data is all powerful. So whosoever has access to data becomes most powerful. See, because they can do data profiling, they can, by looking at the data, by looking at the kind of things you see, the kind of thoughts you air, they know what kind of thought processes you have. So they'll do data profiling, they'll know who are the people who think in a particular way, then they'll pass on this data to those companies who are dealing in different products. They'll say, भाई ये लोग इंडिया के इतने ये लोग हैं जो कि इस तरह की चीजें खरीदते हैं, तो वो डेटा यूज करके उनको फिर उस तरह के वो एड्स पंप इन करने लगेंगे, उनकी बिजनेस, उनके रेवेन्यू सेल्स बढ़ जाएंगे. तो इंडिया का डेटा है लेकिन कंपनियां फॉरेन की उससे फायदा उठाएंगी. सो इंडिया का कहना है, सो वी थिंक दैट वी शुड आल्सो गेट एटलीस्ट समथिंग फ्रॉम दिस. एक तो सिक्योरिटी एस्पेक्ट है, दूसरा ये भी है कि भाई डेटा मोनेटाइजेशन, इट इज आवर डेटा, सो वी शुड आल्सो गेट सम मनी आउट ऑफ इट. I mean, you are using our data and you are generating huge revenues. You've become, I mean, world's biggest company on account of this, essentially because of our consumers who use data in a big way, but we don't get anything out of it. And see, these are all OTTs, over the top players. See, in fact, they have not even invested anything in setting up the infrastructure. See, because they all run on certain mobile connections. So while it could run on Airtel connection or it could run on Jio connections, at least these cellular operators have invested so much. They have spent so much of money. They've shelled out so much of money in getting the spectrum from the government. But these OTT companies like Facebooks and Twitters and WhatsApp, they have not invested anything. It's just an application which is being used globally by millions of people, billions of people. And that is why a handful of people, and I mean, they are controlling. It's not infrastructure companies like Exxon and all, or who are the richest countries in the world. Today, it is these ICT companies who have become, these social media companies that have become the richest in the world, the biggest companies in terms of market capitalization, isn't it?
Yeah, ma'am. We have, ma'am, only 5 minutes. We have
Yes.
run out of the time. So you have two people who want to ask questions. You want to take one question, maybe?
Yeah, please, anyone. You can just regulate.
Janmeet, go ahead, Janmeet.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, can gateways detect data from where the data are coming from? If they are being regulated from country to country, why can't we use AI to detect where is the data coming and is it malicious or not? Hello.
But yeah. So unfortunately, yeah. See, what you are saying is theoretically yes, it's possible, but right now, see, there is no one platform wherein all the data resides, and that one platform is not owned by the government. Government has no control over the data. So once you have this data residing within the country, at least the government can then think about what you are saying. I mean, we can have our own big data analytics and stuff like that, and then we can see. But when the data itself is not residing here, you have no control over the data. You're just generating data which is then flowing out of the country. So it is residing somewhere else.
Yes, ma'am, exactly. So why can't we devise an algorithm
Oh,
using
hello,
AI and
hello,
help?
hello. Okay, okay, Janmeet, we have running short of time.
Yeah,
Only
we'll discuss it offline. Please, you have my
Okay.
number. You can, yeah, and we'll.
Um,
Moniro, quickly. We have 1 minute. You may ask your question.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, first of all, I would like to say that you have amazed us with such deep insights in a very short time. And ma'am, when you were explaining regarding 5G, I was wondering, as explained by you, 5G is going to be live transforming, as it will be dealing with aspects from latency to reliability and efficiency, right, ma'am? So,
Yes.
ma'am, I was wondering, are we expecting a network which will be able to keep in check with the fraudulent aspect over the network as well?
Could you repeat? I didn't understand. Just repeat your question again. Last line,
Ma'am,
last line.
yes, ma'am. I think my question was like, are we going to deal with the fraudulent aspects which comes over the network? So, do we have more control over that as well?
Yeah, so security again is a big issue. Even within ITU, if you have an engineering background, you must be aware of what ITU is doing, International Telecom Union. So while, see, it has different study groups. So while one study group is working on actual technical specifications for these different use cases, there is another working group which is working exclusively on security aspects. That how should the data flow, how would the data be monitored, at what stage, and data privacy, data in case, I mean, the deep packet inspection and stuff like that. Where do you see, how do you see, where do you put those probes in the network? Because, so those are things which are still being formulated. There are very few rollouts of 5G network in the world. And initially, networks will roll out even without security implementations. And it will be only with time, as we become conscious and aware of the various security threats, would these standards be then formed? Because as of now, a lot of things are not even visualized. See, it takes almost 10 years. 5G is called IMT 2020. And the talk for IMT, this 5G started 10 years back. Now, it has taken 10 years for the standards to mature. And now we are seeing first initial rollouts in some developed countries like the US and China and Japan. So they are working on these standards, but it may still take 4 to 5 years. I mean, these are all at very nascent stages. So security
Yes,
issues
ma'am.
have not been dealt with even in 4G yet in a big way, in a full way, in a complete way. So 5G, it is still at a very nascent stage. Of course, we are following, we are closely monitoring the work that is being done in the standardization bodies in the world, and we also go there, we give our contributions, but it is still at a very nascent stage.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you are most welcome, all of you, to sort of, if you have any questions, you can offline discuss with me, or we can send your mails.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I hope it was useful for all of you.
Yeah,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you so
since
much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
you're most welcome, ma'am, and we, on behalf of Delhi School of Business, Vivekanand Institute of Professional Studies, I am obliged, and I am really thankful that you have taken out time out of your busy schedules. I know it's a working day for you, and you have been running between different offices, taking care of two large organizations. So, on behalf of my organization, Delhi School of Business, Vivekanand Institute of Professional Studies, on behalf of my class, 68 students of MBA second year, we all thank you, and we are really, you know, sort of grateful that we got such a high speaker with such a high credentials, such a good knowledge, and who take pain to put together such a simple PowerPoint to make her point to students. Some of us are novice here when it comes for technology, and the session, I think I really enjoyed the session. we will try to take feedback from students also. I will pass on the feedback to you, and I'll also pass any question that students have as a follow-up to you, if you permit. And we all thank you very much, and I look forward to uh, call you again to come and visit our campus when it open up and meet all the students face to face, and it will be our honor. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. It would be a pleasure to sort of interact with your students again. Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank
It
you.
Yeah, it's our thing to normally give bouquet and gift to our guest speaker, but in online presence, this sort of remains. So I have to verbally give our sort of bouquet and thanks to you. But we'll try to make it up when you visit us to meet the students in campus. Okay, with that we come to an end, and I thank Deepa ji and all the students. We will meet in the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir. Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.